The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please, come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately, her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that, they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel for this Sunday comes from the 5th chapter of St. Mark. We have been reflecting on the God who gives life and life as the gift of God. In the first reading, we see from the Book of Wisdom how God is the Creator, and so He is the source of life. He does not intend destruction or death. But death here is not just a natural phenomenon. Death is the action of the devil, who, out of envy, wants to destroy God and God's action. So there is a theological understanding of life and death. And in the second reading from the second letter of Paul to the Corinthians, we see that life coming from Christ was generated by Jesus' self-emptying. He became poor. He died so that He could give life. And so the Corinthians, who helped the poor Christians in Jerusalem by taking up a collection, were following Jesus. They allowed themselves to become a little poorer so that they could extend help to their brothers and sisters. That is how to live. There is no true life without the readiness to empty oneself, to die to self. Now, in the Gospel, we find Jesus again, the image of the God who gives life. we see Jesus as the human face of the God whose intention is not only to create life, but also to sustain life and to protect life. Again, life here is not to be understood as a natural thing that we can play with or can manipulate. Life here is a precious gift of God. It is divine. That's why God in Jesus will promote it, will defend it. Now, the narrative is really composed of two short stories. Let me focus first on this young girl, 12 years old, the daughter of Jairus, a synagogue official. This girl fell ill, and the father, just like any father, will do anything, will approach anyone for the daughter to be healed. And Jairus approached Jesus with a request that he visit their house and lay his hands on his daughter. And this is something striking. Jesus did not even ask any question. He did not ask Jairus, "Where is your house? How far is it from here? How long has your daughter been sick?" No questions asked. Jesus just went with him. The two went together in order to see the girl. What do we find here? Jesus, the one sent by God, the creator and giver of life, Jesus was so eager to face the threat to life. Remember, sickness, according to the Jewish world, is not just a biological fact. Sickness is not just a pathology. For them, sickness, which is a threat to life, is rooted in the action of the evil one. Very similar to what we heard in the first reading. So Jesus, the one sent by God, the God of life, without any questions, eagerly would confront a sickness that is threatening the life of this girl. Jesus wants to confront the enemy of life. But when they got to the place, the girl had already died. And so the people met them and said to Jairus, "Do not bother the master. It's too late. Let him go. Let him rest." But for Jesus, he said, "No, the girl is sleeping." And Jesus did more than just heal the girl. Jesus raises the girl back to life. Little girl, rise up. In Jesus, we see the power of God over death. I would want to see this already as in a way, a prefiguration of what will happen to Jesus himself, how he will rise from the dead, and how he promises to us, God is stronger than the devil, and so life is stronger than death. If only we would cling to Jesus, we could turn to Jesus and experience the eagerness of Jesus to bring us back to life. So, dear brothers and sisters, when you experience a threat to your life, not just in the form of illness, but especially the deadly threat coming from evil, do you imitate Jairus? Do you turn to Jesus for protection, for healing? Oh my Lord, in our times, there are many gadgets, many medicines, many organic foods that claim to promote life. Okay, they are all good. But let us not forget to turn to the author of life, the one who can destroy the enemy of life. Turn to Jesus. Now, there is a second story in the gospel. The woman who has been suffering hemorrhage for 12 years, and according to the gospel, has lost a fortune by going to doctors, but nothing has happened. And this woman, learning about Jesus, passing by, thought, if only I could touch His clothing, I would be healed. So this woman had faith in Jesus, and she made her way through the crowd and touched Jesus. Now, the sickness of this woman, hemorrhage, is not just a sickness that is a threat to life. There is another implication of hemorrhage. According to Jewish ritual laws, the discharge of blood makes someone impure. And so this woman could not worship in the temple because she, through the hemorrhage, has just been declared ritually impure. So that is also a form of death. No, you cannot participate in prayer. You cannot participate in the worship of the holy people of God because you are impure. But the law of the Jews also says that if you touch a woman with a discharge of blood, or the woman touches you, you also get contaminated. You also become impure. So avoid the woman with a hemorrhage, because you will become impure. You will be contaminated by her impurity. But what happened when the woman touched Jesus? Jesus felt power coming out of him. And he asked around, who touched me? Of course, the disciples said, do you realize? There's a big crowd here and you want to determine who touched you. But Jesus felt power coming out of him. Life coming out of him. And what happened? Did the hemorrhage of the woman contaminate Jesus? Did Jesus become impure? No. It was the other way around. The woman was healed. The woman became pure. Wow, brothers and sisters, this is a moment of hope for us. We all have our impurities. We have our sinfulness. And many times we are afraid to touch Jesus. We are ashamed to make Jesus see our impurities, as though we are afraid to tarnish him, to contaminate him. The good news is, he is truly the Lord of life. When we touch him, his purity, his life comes to us, and we are healed. So let us turn to the Lord, individually, as families, as a nation. Let us bring to him our sickness, our worries, the threats to life that we are experiencing, and let us rely on the power of Jesus. He brings life. He brings us life. I want to end this sharing by narrating to you an experience of mine when I officiated in the golden wedding anniversary of a couple, a lovely couple. They had 8 children. They have had 8 children so far, and now a host of grandchildren, and they celebrated also the birth of their first great-grandchild during their golden jubilee. I was so much touched by the sharing of the woman. She said, every time a child is born, my relatives and friends would always tell me, hey, another burden, another burden, another problem for you, you know. And whenever a grandchild is born, they say, okay, another burden, another problem for you. But then she declared during that Mass, said, no, every child that we have had is not a problem, but a blessing, a new life that comes from God. And we are greatly blessed We may not be rich financially, but we are alive because the Lord has made us share in His life through our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Let us celebrate God by celebrating life. The Word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.